Hey guys, it's Alex
And Emily.
from the Penn State Digital Beehive. We're back with part 3 of the Introduction to Revit 2020 series. Today we're going to be focusing on some additional skills that you might need to really push your model to a new level. Some of the things we didn't get to cover yet. So we're going to start looking at how to change some components of a wall to really build up that wall section to be realistic. We're going to show how to place a curtain wall into our residential house here. We're going to show how to import some families from Revit City into your model. We're going to show a little bit with visibility and graphics settings, as well as how to use the view templates on your floor plans and other drawings. We're going to talk a little bit more about annotations and then show you guys how to add some lights into your model using the reflected ceiling plans. So to start, we're going to look at that exterior wall that we built up in the second video. So this wall in the second video was a 8-inch generic wall. So I will switch this back to 8-inch generic so I can demonstrate what we did in order to build up that wall section for this model. So if we go to our 3D view, you'll see that this wall right now is just blank. It's the default gray, and it has not been changed like the other exterior walls that you see in the model. So on that ground floor plan, if we go ahead and click that 8-inch generic wall, I'm going to go to Edit Type under Properties. Then we're going to want to duplicate this wall. So I'm going to call it 8-inch. For this one, I think we're going to use somewhat of an insulated metal panel on metal stud wall construction, or on wood stud wall construction, I believe. So I'm going to say insulated metal panel, and then wood stud. So depending on what you want in your wall, it may not be 8 inches thick. So we're going to want to make sure that that is the correct thickness for what's represented in the wall. But in order to start changing these things, we can go into the structure under Edit, and we're going to see the layers in the wall here. So at the top, you see where it says exterior side, that's what's going to face out, and then our interior side at the bottom. So I'm going to want to go ahead and insert just a couple default functions here, and then we will modify them to reflect our wall. So I have a few in here, may need to add another couple, but we'll get started with this. So on the interior layer, we can go ahead and call that finish 1 for now. And then under the material for here, we're going to want this to be gypsum wallboard. Later, if you'd like this to be painted or some other texture, you could certainly go in and replace the asset using the material asset library process described in video 2. But for now, we're going to use gypsum wallboard. I'm going to go up to that appearance. I'm going to duplicate that just in case we want to change it later. We'll have that ability to do so. So now with that gypsum wallboard, we're going to want to make that thickness representative of what that would actually be. So we'll start with a 1/2 inch would work for that. Next, we're going to look at some structure. So we'll do structure 1 for material. If this is going to be a wood structure, we're going to look at something possibly find, so we have a wood stud layer, so we're going to use this. If we wanted to reflect it, we could change it, make it a southern yellow pine or something like that. For now, we can leave it as it is and just duplicate that asset and apply. So I think we are assuming that this is going to be a 2x4 nominal structure. Is that correct, Emily?
Yes.
Okay, so for the thickness of this in our long dimension, for a 2x4, we're looking at 3.5 inches for that nominal size. Again, it may actually be a 2x6. We could see what's going to get us to 8 here with keeping these realistic dimensions. So the next, I think we're going to have air layer. We're not going to do every single component of the wall, but just the ones that will really show up in plan. In real life, you'd have some extra air barrier and vapor barriers, but they don't really have a thickness that you need to account for. So here, if we just do as a air barrier, have just blank air material, so essentially nothing. And looks like right now our total thickness is 4 inches. So we could make that air barrier 2 inches, and then that would still allow for us to have some brackets that would then affix the metal panel to the house. So I'll go ahead and insert one more layer here. This be finished 5. For the material on here, I'm going to want to replicate what I've already done with that exterior panel. So as this is the model I've already been working in, I think I already have that material. And I can walk back through the process of how I did that once we find it here. So IMP, insulated metal panel exterior, is the material I created for that. What I used for that, I replaced that asset with just sort of a brushed aluminum appearance. The other thing I did with that is I duplicated that asset once I went to appearance here. So I have that stainless brushed. And then under the graphics in the 3D view, you notice that I have sort of that crosshatch pattern. I put that on in the foreground here. So if we double click on that and open it up, these are all the default fill patterns you can get with Revit. A lot of these can be modified to match the scale of your building. They will come in based on the drafting view size. So if you notice in our plan at the bottom left here of our screen, we're at an 1/8 inch equals a foot for our plan. So we're going to look for something that's going to kind of match that in the size. You can also use model. It'll just reflect in all views as opposed to the size you'd like it to be in your scaled view. So for this one, I've used just a crosshatch, and we go ahead and apply that. And then you notice up here, we're still at a total thickness of 6 inches. So in order to get to that final amount, we're going to add an extra 2 inches of wall thickness there. Again, a real wall may be a little different from this, but if you want to show your components and build this up, you can modify it however you need to. So now when we hit OK, we have our new family that has all of our modified components. It's showing 8 inches, so we're good on the thickness. We're going to go ahead and click OK. So you'll notice up here, it's now reflecting the actual materials in this little tiled window. And if I was to go to override the graphics in the view, or let's see here. So we're going to get into view templates later, but I'm going to quickly just take off our override for walls so I can show you what's inside here. Essentially, I have told Revit to make all our walls just solid black, but I'm going to have that just be set back to no override so we can see the inside here. So if we change that detail level from coarse to fine and apply that, now we can see in our walls that we have that insulated metal panel towards the outside there. I'll turn off thin line so you can see it a little better. We have our metal panel, our air gap, and then our studs. And then we also have that very thin layer of gypsum wallboard on the inside. So these are the things you can add to your model to really enhance the level of detail and constructability of your Revit model. So I'm going to go ahead and just change this to the other exterior wall insulated metal panel that we have already created in this model. And next, Emily's going to walk you guys through some of the nuances of curtain wall. We're going to place it right here on the north side of the window, living room.
So the curtain wall is kind of its own special type of wall. It's still under the architectural wall type, and it'll be at the bottom of the list of all of your walls. You draw it the same way, and it has the same base constraints and top constraints, so we'll leave those as ground and second floor, adjusting for the thickness of the floor slab. Curtain walls are always drawn with a wall center line. That's their only option. So we're going to replace that north living room wall there with the curtain wall. So
we have a couple options here. We can physically take out this wall. The construction of this wall in this model, in this particular one, is actually double height. So if we split the wall in half, then we will lose the wall on the second floor as well. And it'll also expose the floor assembly. So the best way to do this is with something I touched on earlier, which is also under the architecture tab and is wall opening. So with this, we're able to create an opening in this wall by selecting that, clicking on one side and then the other. And what this does for us is just creates an opening in the wall that matches a set of dimensions. So if we go ahead and click on that wall opening, we could specify that we'd like it to be 8 inches or 8 feet wide, and that will match the width of our curtain wall. Up here, you notice that we're hosted at the ground level, and then I would like it to go up to just the second floor. So our top offset from the second floor with 10-foot floor-to-floor height would be 2 feet. So we'd like that unconnected height opening to be 8 foot. So when we go ahead and apply that and then take a look at our 3D view, you now see that we have a nice open hole that does not expose the floor assemblies, where we can essentially place that curtain wall in.
we'll go ahead and draw that wall now that we've created the opening. Some of the constraints that you can control within the curtain wall are the vertical and horizontal mullion spaces. You can either set a fixed number that you want to have in there or a fixed distance. So we can go ahead and choose the fixed number. And Revit will just automatically fill those in. And for the horizontal grid, those are the ones going vertically up the wall. We can go ahead and do a fixed number for that one as well. You will need to also apply a mullion type for each of those interior and borders. Usually you can just pick the same one unless you have a specific reason for changing. We can just use 1.5 by 2.5, and you will need to apply that for all 6 of them. You can also do this manually outside of the wall type. It gets a little bit trickier to do that, so it's usually best just to start within this type properties panel.
We have exterior wall and then our curtain panels. You are able to put other things in the curtain panel except for glass, but we're going to leave it as default for now. So if we go ahead and apply that, hit OK, we will be ready to place the wall.
So Revit went ahead and created a equal number of spaces within that wall and added the mullions as we asked it to. Take a look at it in 3D. Creating a very square grid there for the elements.
So definitely for a house of this size, and since this wall is not really holding up any structure, this amount of mullions would be definitely way oversized. So if we look at that vertical grid and adjust the number, we think it's 8 foot wide. We could probably get 2 pieces of glass that are 4 foot by 8, but maybe for the aesthetics we want them to sort of look vertical. So maybe we could drop this down to 2 or 3 just to create a few less pieces. And then with that horizontal grid, you can adjust it to any amount that you'd like. So for this one, maybe we'll need a separation there, and we want the appearance at the top to be a little bit better. So one thing about adjusting curtain wall grids is that you have to select the grid itself instead of the mullion. So this grid right here in the center will come up when you find the dashed blue line by cycling through the tab. You will see our little push pin here, so we know we need to unpin this element. So you can unpin that by just clicking on that push pin. We want the visual experience for the people inside to be better at the top, so I think we might maybe show a smaller window at the bottom and a bigger opening at the top. So at the bottom we could adjust this to 2 feet, creating 6 foot of glass at the top. And then we can go ahead and pin that to make sure it doesn't move back on us later. So the way that curtain walls work is that each element in between the mullions can be modified, and that's your curtain wall panel. So this particular panel here is glazed, which would just be your typical glass. By default, we also have empty if you don't want anything in there. So this could be good for just sort of a feature lattice or something like that in a project. And if we get back to that curtain panel, by tabbing through our options, which is now a little bit more difficult to find since we've already removed it, but it lives right there. We can also use a solid system panel. So these curtain wall systems can be used for facade skins as well as just your typical glazing. And you can adjust the materials and the appearance of all of these different things by modifying the families.
This same process can then be used to change one of these panels into a door. If that's what you would choose to do, you would need to load that family. It's a single door component there, but then we'll allow a handle to appear in the find view, and also the door swing will appear in plan.
So if we want to get a door in here, we got to move this mullion back out of the way. So we can take this up to 7 feet to give us a typical door height. So we'll move back to plan here just for a second. And let's say we want to put our door right here all the way to the left side. So we want to grab this mullion grid and make sure we have the clearance for a door. So we're going to unpin that and then make this 3 foot so that we have the right opening for a door. It will adjust the look of the curtain system, so just be aware that when you do put in doors, typical intervals would be 3 or 6 feet in order to keep that consistency. We can go ahead and pin that, or we can go ahead and keep that where it's at. And then we're going to want to select that system panel. You notice we don't have any doors loaded for that, since they will also come up under this system panel type, since you're putting it directly into the wall. To load that, we're going to go into our load family and then go to doors. And then you'll notice we also have double doors. So if you did have a 6 foot width, you would just be able to put in one set of glass doors. But for this one, we're going to want wall single glass. We're going to open that up.
You're going to have to load it in the insert or in the door is fine too. This is one of the only types that I believe you have to load going to the insert tab. And then loading the family from there. This will let you bring in any type of family. The error we were getting was saying that the door wasn't a component and it wasn't a door. But by loading it just from the generic insert tab, it'll allow it to be brought into the project.
Okay, so this is the only type of door that will do this. So we'll come in here underneath the wall curtain panel system, and you'll see we have curtain wall single glass right here. So now from that exterior view, you can see with a fine level of detail, we have our handle, and in plan, we'll see that door swing. And if we want to kind of clean this up a little bit, you could go ahead and adjust the remaining you could set these to some sort of fixed distance. So whether it's, sort of 131 or however you'd like it to do for your design, but to be able to just kind of clean that up a little bit after you place your door in. So I think the next thing we're going to show is how to bring in a family from Revit City. So I already have Revit City open. So revitcity.com, once you go in there, you can essentially look for anything you'd like just by typing in the search bar. I think we're going to be stuck on my Revit screen here since I only shared my the specific screen to Revit, but I can go ahead and download one and just bring it in for you guys. So I'm on revitcity.com right now, and I typed in basketball hoop. I'm going to place one in my backyard here. So if I go ahead and hit download now, in my downloads, it's going to pop up a .rfa or family file. And then I'm going to go ahead and open that model. So when I click open, it says that the model is from Revit 2014. So we're going to have to upgrade it. So here's my awesome basketball hoop. We're going to be pros in the backyard now. So we're going to want to load this into the project and close the family. So now that we have that basketball hoop in here, don't have a good spot for it, but let's say we're going to play some pool ball. Now we have this entire component in our Revit file. And this sort of thing works for anything that Revit City may have. So it's a great place that I look for entry canopies. A lot of times we'll get custom furniture off of Revit City. And it's all stuff that has been user curated and submitted. And with a free account, you can download as much as you want. Then next, Emily's going to go over some visibility graphics and view template settings for us for our plans here.
So we touched on this a little bit, that we can open the visibility graphics panel typically just by using VV. We do have a view template applied to this plan view, so it won't let you change it just by doing that. So you will need to open that from the properties panel. So it's under identity data and view template there. So we'll open up that and open up the visibility graphics panel as well. So you can basically, this allows you to tell Revit that you want your walls to have a poche, or just change line weights or views of that. So we can walk you through the process just using the walls. Since we undid that, we'll use the cut patterns, set it to solid fill, and then just select a color. It can be black or whatever. We'll use black in this case. And then you can hit apply. So that would be the pattern. You can also change the lines if you wanted them to be a different color for some reason, adding solid and just choosing a color. So then what that will do is apply that to all of the views that you have assigned this view template to. So it would be the same for the second floor plan that we also have set up. So I believe we did this for a couple of other families types as well, beyond just walls.
So typically in plan, I think if you're planning on showing in poche, the main things you'd want to show the cut pattern as black would be through your doors, your walls, any columns that you may have, which we only have one on our patio here in the front patio. Maybe other elements that you'd like to do things to. So we have our view template here, and this one's controlling everything in the model right now because we have it set. But if we were to select none and apply that, then everything that's in the model here, when you don't have a view template selected for this view, can be controlled from just the standard VV. So when we're doing VV as a keyboard shortcut, pulls up our visibility graphics, where you see it's going to have the last saved version of whatever you had in your template. So for this instance, it still has that terrible pink line that I put in there. So I'm going to turn this back off. So when you don't have the template applied, everything will happen just in your standard visibility graphics. And really the pro for using a view template is once you have a whole bunch of floor plans, or you have 6, 7, 8 different sections, and you all want them to be represented identically. It saves a lot of time. You just have to remember that you have the view template on, because sometimes you'll start to try to change things in the view. You'll go ahead and put your template back on, and you'll be in your plan and you're going to try to change something in here and everything's grayed out. So sometimes it's a little frustrating to use one. So sometimes I put mine on towards the end once I'm getting much closer to kind of being ready to go to export some drawings. So like Emily said, when your template is up, essentially everything that would typically be handled in the properties palette is now handled in the view template. So that view template is plan poche. This pink line will not go away. I have no idea why. But this view template for ground floor will also do the exact same thing in the second floor. So it keeps your graphics really tight and consistent, minus the pink line.
And then you can use this in your elevations and your sections as well. You're also able to apply a surface pattern. That would be particularly helpful in your elevation views if you don't have a material applied to your walls. You could select all of your walls and say you wanted it to have that metal panel finish just by adding a surface pattern as opposed to a cut pattern in that view template there. One thing to note while we're in elevation here is how you can take advantage of using the filled region to add your earth below. So there is a filled region type that is the earth hatch. So it's under the annotate tab in filled region. And again, just use the rectangle tool and draw your earth in. You can change the side lines to be invisible and then add a thicker line that is the ground line, or you can use that as a detail line as well.
So I do have that ground line in. You'll remember that the thin lines, when it's turned on, you won't be able to see that thickness. So like in this particular one, since I have that family I brought in for that car, it looks like that's being modified with my thin lines as well. So something I might want to do is that I could just add on that boundary on the top here. I could make this a thicker line. And certain things will work in certain views and others won't. And remember, you can always, if something's bugging you and you want something to work but not something else, you can always override the graphics in the view. So like, might not want this car to be quite so prominent. Might just want it to recede. So I can do a lot of stuff there by overriding the graphics.
And then the last thing to look at is just adding lights to our reflected ceiling plan. So we can do this in the kitchen. You will need to load this family as well, and Revit has some defaults for that. So it's a component, and then you'll go to the lighting folder within the US Imperial. And there are a lot to choose from, as with a lot of the elements we've shown you thus far. We'll go ahead and use two different types. We'll start with a recessed can light. These do need to be hosted to a ceiling for most of them. So it recognizes that there is a ceiling there, so we can just start clicking and placing them wherever we think is best. So we'll put them over the island, or at least eyeball where they are over the island right now. Gonna just use some basic dimensions to keep those even. You can also download different lights from Revit City or other things you find on the internet. You just have to be careful to make sure that they will actually work and function as lights in your Revit model when you install them. It's kind of the worst thing in the world when you put in 10 lights and realize that none of them work and have to go replace all of them.
So here's a great time when you want to use an underlay. So I can go ahead and use my ground floor underlay and apply that. And it's going to let me see everything that's below, directly below the ceiling. So I kind of want these lights to be centered over the island here. So I can go ahead and move them, adjust them around where I think sees fit. And then I'd probably have an additional number of lights here. But if we go ahead and go to one of our interior views, you can see that these recessed can lights are now hosted into the ceiling. And a lot of these lights come with a lot of different options, and have a lot of electrical stuff that is super complicated. But just choosing some lights that make sense, for your project, sticking with LEDs, sticking with stuff that's more subtle, and maybe, looking into some sort of pendant light or fixture for somewhere in this model, maybe like the foyer would be a good place for those types of lights. But um, the great part about a lot of these Revit lights is once you would take a rendering, which we're going to cover a little bit in the intermediate skills video in the future, that sort of once you start rendering, you'll actually be able to get real light coming out of here, so that your model will be render ready just from using Revit. So I think that's all for video 3, unless Emily has anything else.
Nope, that should be it.
All right, great. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in video 4.